Hi, it's Jason and Rachel again with Weatherford Daze. How you doing? It is officially the new year. You notice that behind us, we still don't have our Christmas stuff put away because we love Christmas so much. We just want to keep it up as long as possible. But we are in the
Keep it up till the wise men come, right?
oh, I'm not sure how many months we have to wait for that to happen.
Oh, January
Oh,
6th.
okay. So that's what we're thinking. So we are. We hope you enjoyed our Christmas episodes and our last one, which was a howling good time. And
Wow.
yeah, but Rachel and I were talking. Well, I was really listening because Rachel had some ideas, and I was just like, "Yeah, it sounds good." That's kind of how I roll.
So we've done a lot of broader topics and was thinking that it would be maybe kind of cool this year to delve a little bit deeper into some particular authors. We've done that a few times this last year, but kind of lean a little bit more into that. And while we were thinking about it, we thought maybe we could take and dedicate a month at a time into each type of genre. So that's the thought. We'll see whether we stick with that or not. But at least for this month, we thought that we'd start with one of our favorites, just being parents and kind of going back nostalgic a little bit and going to children's. And, there's only a month that we were thinking dedicating to each of these. I know there are so many amazing children's authors and children's TV and movies and stuff that just were formative for us and that we then turned around and shared and invested those with our children. But, since there's not that many episodes every month, that there's 5 weeks in January, we're going to have to kind of pick the best of the best, right? So this week, we thought, if we're going to go with a TV series, who was the most, who just invested into us and into our kids the most? Who's the best?
I was thinking Mr. Fred Rogers of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, well known on PBS. I remember him from my childhood a great deal. That and Sesame Street was, and some other kind of 3-2-1 Contact and shows like that. Those were kind of my thing from childhood. So I don't know if our kids have as deep a connection with him as I did,
Oh,
but
I think they do.
so probably some reruns on
We
NPT, which is
watched,
Nashville Public
yeah,
Television.
we did a lot of the PBS shows, but Mr. Rogers made an impact for sure. And even the little animated Daniel Tiger's
Daniel Tiger. It
neighborhood
was
that
kind of a
they did.
sequel that came
Yeah,
years
it
later.
still really had the heart, I felt like, of Mr. Rogers. I don't think it was as good.
No, I think Mr. Rogers would have said it was moved too fast. Any animation that moved any faster than he was walking into a
Right,
room
but
is
it
probably a little too fast.
still, I feel like, was notably slower than most of the other animated things.
Yes. Yeah, it did take its time in some
There
places.
was a lot of time. But that is, the time. That's one of the hallmarks of Mr. Rogers that I really truly loved and appreciated. But let's get into just all the things that made Mr. Rogers unique.
I would say that the way that he talked, the way that
Mhm.
he listened, and the way that he paid attention. The thing that stuck out to me, especially from what a lot of people had said, is that he would really spend time and listen to, and you felt heard. Even his wife said there's nobody that she's ever met ever that listened as well as he did, and made you feel like you were being heard. And he would really just let the time go and really just make you feel like you were the most important person in the world at that time. And there's not too many people that can do that in this hurry up and rush around age that we live in. And when he got started, it was the mid to late 60s, and that's when television was really getting, there was crazy things happening in the news. TV was getting faster and faster and faster, and there's more commercialized. He lived, unfortunately, to see how crazy TV has gotten, and it's even before the streaming age when kids are binging things. And my daughter was saying, like this is the Coco Melon era, and I went, oh, God help us.
I feel like
Yeah.
there started to be some pushback though against Cocomelon. It's not as popular as it was, you know,
Well,
whenever it first came
there's a
out.
thing of that this iPad kid thing that
Mhm.
I'm seeing with, I don't know if it's Gen Alphas or whatever, but they hand basically the mom or dad gets on their phone
Mhm.
and it hands the kid a screen and goes, go do your thing and don't bother mom. It's,
Mhm.
and it used to be, go watch, go here, you go do this thing, go play, go outside and play. Mom needs to watch her stories, and it was soap opera. That's a stereotype, and I often would see that in TV shows, and I've never seen that in real life because my mom was not like that.
Yeah. I guess you wonder a lot of the times with those stereotypes how much of it was just a stereotype in TV shows
Maybe
or how
so.
much of it actually happened. Because I feel like I never saw anybody that parented like that either. But
Yeah.
well, maybe we just weren't around the parents that were like that. The stereotype has to come from somewhere.
I went out and played. It was fun, but my mom would actually go, "Hey, go out and play. Don't veg out in front of the tube. Don't play video games too much. Go out and today kids would say touch grass, and that's what my mom would say. And I was a Gen X kid, so when the sun started going down, it's time to go home. You know,
See, we didn't even have TV for a lot of my childhood.
played more than me probably.
So, well, I did play outside, but I also read.
Mm.
I read a lot. I mean, I'm thankful that I had brothers all around my age. My sister was the closest to me, my older sister, but she did not play with us. So, and I honestly don't know what she spent her time doing, but she didn't play with us. The rest of us played. So I was very much, I never played with the Barbie dolls and that the girl play. I was a tomboy. So we climbed trees and we played army games and yeah. So a lot of that imaginative outdoor play was what I got too, just because I was surrounded by brothers.
But sometimes I think with the kids that watched in the early days that watched Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, they were young, maybe 6 or 7 or 5 or 6 or something like that. And in the public television sphere, they were talking about we don't need to neglect the 3 and 4 year olds because there wasn't really this pre-K. This pre-K thing is actually not as old as we think. They didn't have a lot of the pre-K and the
Hmm.
daycares and all kinds of stuff. And there had to be something for them to watch that wouldn't talk down to them, but would speak to them as if they are important
Hmm.
and to pay attention to them but slow down a little bit. And he would sit on the floor and just say, I'm going to build a garage here with a little car. And then they would put the camera down.
Hmm.
In fact, when he was with the kids a lot saying, in person, he would get down on their level and just talk to them and listen to them and let them talk. If you give them some space, they'll talk and they'll ask questions and they'll fill that space when they feel comfortable doing that. And I don't know of anybody like him except for my own parents in some ways. When I was really young, I get that vibe from Mr. Rogers, and like many people say, he's the same as he is on screen as off. I think his wife probably saw more of the real him and his struggles with and his frustrations with just the way that the world was going and the way things were in the industry that he was in. You know,
Which we should probably mention. We watched a documentary on Mr. Rogers, and
it's called "Won't You Be My Neighbor."
mhm,
Came out in 2018. It won some awards. I'm not sure, but
which we can maybe link that. It's on YouTube. Yeah, I thought it was really good. It really did a good job in representing who he was along the nature of the show. I felt like they really did focus a lot on the happy and on the positive, which Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood is a happy, positive show. It never veered away from hard topics.
Yeah.
And Mr. Rogers, I feel like, was one of the first kids programs that really did say it's okay to feel your feelings. And that was a huge departure at the time, I feel like. I think one of the things that it mentioned in the documentary that really jumped out at me
Hmm.
was his wife saying that they had been raised to not show their feelings,
Mm.
that it wasn't okay for them to say that they were scared or that they were angry or, any of those things, that they had to be good, had to be a
Was it
good boy
the
and a good girl.
I was thinking of the phrase when you were saying that children should be seen and not heard.
Hmm. I think about, talking with my mom and about how she was raised and my dad. They're very much still had that mentality when they were young kids. That was the way that they were raised too. Was, and they talk about their parents even more so than they were, being raised in, the 60s. If you go back even further than that, it was just the culture that children were not allowed to express their feelings.
Parents, I think, sometimes did not play with their kids,
Mhm.
and to imagine things with them. That's stuff they did with their friends, and don't do that too much.
I think that
You know.
they had playtimes, but it was also very much a, you have to, the emotions got squashed and they got told, this is the way you're supposed to act. It doesn't matter how you feel, you behave. So you bring your actions are more important than your emotions, and then your emotions kind of follow, right?
Right.
You act brave, you act strong, and you will be. And there is a little bit of validity to that, but it's got to have balance. You know, you can't lean so far into your emotions that it's like, oh, you're scared. Well, you're just a scared person, and I'm going to be scared all the time, and it becomes my identity. It's more of a, you're scared. I understand. You're allowed to be scared. Now let's work through it to when you're not scared, because scared is not a good place to sit, right? And that's where, I feel like, okay, and we're going to jump into this.
Okay. Okay.
Because I know from talking to you that this is one place that you wanted to go.
Okay.
And that's that there was pushback on Mr. Rogers, saying that he was the one that created a bunch of kids that were just too emotional, right? By saying that you are special no matter what, just by being who you are. And that was something that was very uniquely Mr. Rogers at the time. That was not something that was, right now, that's in a ton of programming and kids shows and books, and even, for adults, we have that all over the place, that it's okay to be who you are, that you are, we've talked about before the whole you are enough
Right.
mentality,
Right.
right?
This kind of self-help. It was very, very inward focused.
Hmm.
Goes in. Yeah.
And Mr. Rogers very much started that with kids. The idea of, you are special just for being you, and I love you just the way you are. And so there was pushback saying that he had created these entitled kids that never amounted to anything, or, pushed to become more
They call it the
because they were
participation
special just because of
trophy
who they are.
generation. Participation trophy generation. Because,
Right.
that they're like, I showed up, I should just get something. And they're like, well, what about those who like achieved, that worked hard and achieved their goal? And they goes, well, that's not fair. Let's give something to everybody. and sometimes life isn't like that. And I think that sometimes we can do kids a disservice by doing that. But also, I don't buy that the entitlement is from, that they were looking for a scapegoat, I think,
Yeah.
and they thought about, well, Mr. Rogers being so iconic, they wanted to blame it on him. And
Well, because the problem that you have with any type of thing like that is you
mhm,
can have pendulum swings that happen.
mm,
So when Mr. Rogers first started, you had a generation of kids that had never been told that they were special,
yeah,
that there was anything of worth in them just by who they are. And that's a very Christian thing. Mr. Rogers was a minister, he was
ordained,
ordained.
yeah,
And yet, his ordination happened as he's also getting into television and very focused on children. And he kind of took that.
that's his ministry,
Yes, that was his ministry. I don't think that he ever, you know, served in a church or anything like
right?
that. He took that ordination and he funneled that into children. That was his calling. And I just, you're going from these kids that had never been told that who they are is special, that they're allowed to feel their emotions, that it's okay to be who you are. But then the pendulum swung, right?
I don't think we can blame
And that's not Mr.
that on him.
Rogers'
No,
fault. That's not what he was saying. He's saying we're too far here. Let's come back to the middle.
yeah,
When things swung too far the other way, you know, I don't think that he would have, that's never where he wanted it to go. That's never what he said. He never said, you you are who you are, so stay where you are and never try to become better. That's where the pendulum swings too far,
I think
is the entitlement of going, I don't have to strive.
he stopped short of saying you were made in the image of God
Mm.
and you are special to your heavenly Father. You were made with a purpose. I think those are some biblical stuff that he could have pulled out. But he didn't really mention any of those things. All the things he mentioned were very,
But I don't think it would
um,
have dawned on him
it wouldn't have helped either.
that people would have taken
Made him
it
so
to the
universal.
other end,
Yeah.
because he was pushing back against something that had swung too far one way. So, you know, you don't think about, oh, there's a potential for this to swing entirely the other way, and I need to safeguard against that. And now we're trying to make sure that we don't go too far either direction and that we're staying in that balance.
Which is what he was trying to do in the first
Right.
place.
But, we can't fault him for not having, the ability to see where that pendulum would swing.
And the thing that I wanted to mention real quick is that we are so afraid of talking about subject matter
Mm.
that is important. I was just thinking about a YouTube video I saw earlier, and I noticed again how if you say certain words, that the automated AI algorithm will demonetize your video or drop it down for no reason other than you said those words.
Mhm.
And if you've been on the internet long enough, you know what they are. But what I was shocked again, I've seen the documentary before, and it still hit me again. I saw things the second time when I watched it. One of the first episodes they ever did, they talked about the Vietnam conflict. I mean, it was underneath
Mhm.
what they were talking about but they didn't really go into the details, but it was under there. The king came out and he was immediately talking about borders and change. I'm against the changers. They're always wanting to change things. I want to keep everything the same. And you had guys, paratrooping, and this one guy was sending messages of love and peace with with parachutes. And so these are things, and they're talking about, you know, shooting things. Let's just say that.
You talked about the assassination of JFK, right?
It wasn't J. It was JFK
Oh,
happened in
no,
'63.
Reagan?
No, it was his brother. It was Bobby Kennedy. Was
Oh,
killed by was assassinated by Sirhan Sirhan.
okay.
He was a speaking engagement, and everybody was just yeah. It was Bobby Kennedy. Um,
That's like he wasn't afraid to talk about death either.
Yeah, or
Just things that,
divorce.
right. And I mean, even, I don't know, he talked about a fish
The dead fish. Yeah.
dying in his aquarium. And I don't know that you would even be allowed to show that in a kid's show nowadays.
Yeah.
It just, I feel like, we've talked about the trigger warnings and stuff before, as it's like, while it can be good that it's there, it also, you know, sometimes we take those too far, or we just have people that aren't really moving past things. They're not getting the help that they need. It almost, the fact that they have this trauma becomes a part of their identity rather than it being something bad that they know that they need to work through.
And Mr. Rogers would help people work through those things. He
Right.
would talk it through with them and go, sometimes this is what happens sometimes, and
Mhm.
that's not your fault. It's just, it's this other situation, outside of your control, and helping you talk through it and work through it.
Mhm.
He even talked about when he was burying the fish on that episode, he was talking about a dog that he had. When there's another part of the scene, you talk about a dog when he had when he was little, and that dog died, and he talked about how much he loved it, and he wanted to keep it to maybe it would come back to life, and he talked to his parents. His parents said that wasn't going to happen. So there's that ability to work through those things, and later you get the '80s. I remember the '80s was so sanitized that you would have GI Joe shooting laser guns because bullets weren't allowed, and I understand. And if
Yeah.
something blew up, always had there was rules. You always had to see a parachute with the guy coming out of it because you couldn't say, "Oh,
Mhm.
that car blew up. What if there was a person in it?" So there were very much people afraid of kids knowing those things, and I understand that.
But you
He wouldn't have
don't
liked that either.
want to model behavior in kids programming that you don't want them to emulate. That was
Yeah,
another one of the things that stuck out to me in documentaries, is how upset or in the documentary,
yeah,
that he got really upset over the superhero
yes.
programs, where, because he heard about some children jumping off like a high building with a cape on.
It was like a second story, like
Right,
house.
because
Yeah,
they expected to be able to fly.
like Superman. Yeah,
This was their magic cape, and they were going to be able to fly. And he's going, "No, we need to talk about, you know, that yes, you can have imagination, but you have to be safe,
and what
because
is
there's a
make
difference
believe?
between make believe and reality." And the children's programming wasn't doing a good job of actually drawing that line for children. So,
He was the perfect guy to talk about that because he would always in the middle, some not always, but many times in the show, he'd come over and sit down at a specific little bench. Behind him was a little train track with a trolley on it. And the trolley, he would talk to it. Of course, he would talk in its little tinkling little sounds. But it would go in there. He wouldn't follow it. He was always in the real world
mhm,
as Fred Rogers. In the land of make believe, he was doing all the voices and things like that. And that's the place where through this play, you can work through some of these feelings and some of these things, these feelings that even were deep seated in him about bullying
mhm.
and self esteem and feeling like he was a mistake. I can't tell you. I'm not trying to cry, but those are some deep things that people think about now, and they talked about him in a public broadcasting TV show, and they were able to talk about those emotions, and it's a miracle that stuff got on. Well, it's not because I think it had to be God, but in commercial, on the commercial channels, they would always try to sell things, and they didn't want any spaces for that kind of let's let this emotion breathe. They were like commercial time, and they'd skip away to commercial, let's sell you something. And in that world that he had, you could take your time. You
Mhm.
could really let the moment breathe. And I think that we are dying for that now. We actually have. I was talking to Lydia earlier, and I said we actually have video channels where people are like just be quiet and, making little noises and stuff. I'm like, or mindfulness is such a big thing right now.
The ASMR
Yeah, I don't
stuff.
like ASMR, but mindfulness is such a thing right now. And I know that was a big thing even back during the 60s and 70s with the transcendental meditation movement. But you didn't see any of that in Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. It was a being okay with silence
Mhm.
and letting a moment breathe to think about, you know,
Like he
forgiveness even.
understood way more about child development than most kids program people
That's
today.
because he studied under the best. I think his
Hmm.
one of his first things that he did was he went and studied under I can't remember the name of the lady. Sorry, studied under her, and she was very formative. And he even when one of his producers was going to join up with him, and she said, "What do I need to do?" And he goes, "You need to go and learn about childhood development from in these certain schools and things like that." And it was invaluable because once the producer and him were in the same mindset, everything else flowed from that. So he definitely understood more than most. I I think I think even more than Sesame Street. I think that Mr. Rogers understood
Hmm.
children more than Sesame Street did. And they both used puppets and they both used real people. But I think that honestly he was able to
Well,
speak
I
to those
think
deeper things.
there were different emphasis
Yeah.
for Sesame Street and for Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers really did, he was interested in how emotionally kids developed. And there was an exploration of the world, there was an educational aspect, but he cared more about the emotional stability and about kids feeling safe, knowing that they were loved, being
Scene.
cared for,
Yeah.
being heard and understood.
Yeah.
Whereas Sesame Street is very much more about kids just educational learning,
Letters and
the
numbers and
letters and the
colors
numbers and the
and
colors and
yeah, please and thank you.
right. So it shapes and that kind of stuff.
Right.
Sesame Street is not as much about the emotional maturity
And
and
social, yeah.
right as Mr. Rogers was. So there's a place for both, but I do definitely appreciate Mr. Rogers more. And I think that, if I had a choice between the two programs, what would I put in front of my kids? It would be Mr. Rogers every time.
I think our kids also have others that they kind of gravitated to that were a little bit more fast in motion and movement, like the Magic School Bus. They
Hmm.
they still talk about that show to this day. Little Einsteins was big when my kids were little, but they talk more about shows like like Magic School Bus more
Well, I think that they
nostalgia.
watched Magic School
Backyardigans.
Bus when they were older.
Oh,
So, they're going to have just there's going to be a difference in what they remember more
yeah,
of based on how old they were when they watched it. And, you know, Little Einsteins was when they were pretty little that they were watching that. They were, 2, 3 years old. Mr. Rogers was in the 3 to 5, 6-year-old stage with them. And Magic School Bus was more when they were 7, 8, 9, 10, somewhere in there. So, those just kind of grow along with them. But I can tell you, especially for William, when he talks about what really made an impact and stuck with him, it was Mr. Rogers. Yeah, he'll talk about backyardigans a lot, but Mr. Rogers was the one that just it holds his heart. And he's mentioned a lot of times, we need more like that.
they show up in the
There's just
documentary. I'd
not
love it.
enough programs they're really, it's so unique. Just how much time he took, how much care, and the amount of excellence. He really was so talented, musically talented,
Oh yeah,
with the
expressed himself
puppetry,
musically,
the
his emotion.
voices. Yeah. And then you put all of those things with just such a truly loving, caring person who was kind, and he loved children. You could tell he loved children. He loved what he was getting to do. It was really his calling. And I feel like God uniquely gifted him and placed him in that situation.
And even after he retired, he's in the documentary. He's it shows him on the beach, and his wife says that he, in the time between when he retired to when he passed away in 2003, he just really missed it. He said, "I miss being with my playmates," and I honestly think I actually feel sad for the kids that grow up now that are, unless you expose them to it, are not going to know. And I was watching some reaction videos today of people who didn't even know that he existed. There was a guy from New Zealand. He watched it with his daughter and said, "Who is this guy? Let's watch this. It's from America." And he was really touched by it. And I'm like, I'm Gen X, and I was born in '77, and I definitely grew up. I have memories of watching. It was called APT because it was in Alabama. Oh wait, oh man, some weird memories. I remember, I don't know which public station it was, but I was sick, and I was my grandmother, who's now gone to be with the Lord. She watched me while I was sick, and I was watching. I remember watching Bert and Ernie and Mister Rogers and stuff like that. Yeah,
Mm.
when I was little bitty and not feeling well. But yeah, there's a lot of old memories that come up, with him. Now I see it as, oh, no big deal, but he was busting open walls too. I was very touched with how he was willing to sit down with, on the show, he's Officer Clemens, because he's a black man, he's an African American man, and to put his feet in the tiny little pool with him, and just kind of, and it kind of hit me that was a time when that was a no-no. You don't, that's that people were like, no, don't do that. That segregation was big. And he was like, this is another human being.
Mhm.
And he goes, do you mind if I towel off your feet? And I went, that's a very Jesus thing to do. But it doesn't hit me now because I'm like, oh, this is nice. Two guys just hanging out in the summer. It's nice. And there was this special connection that it's just like he sees everybody as, whether they have a disability, anything like that. He does. He doesn't treat them as any other person. But he asks them questions. What's it like, going through this, and how do you feel about that? And those are some things that parents will say, oh, no, don't ask him about, don't bother him. Don't say that. But to kind of broach those subjects and talk about those things. I mean, we talked about that earlier, but that's where I think that if you let kids ask questions and answer them honestly, and don't tell them not to ask those questions, I think that, to let them express themselves, and I think they get a lot out of that. Yeah.
That is one thing that really did strike me
Hmm.
with, when you were talking about him putting his feet in the pool, and that wasn't a done thing. He really did. And I didn't realize, just watching it when I was watching it as reruns and that kind of stuff, but how much and how intentional he was with reacting to what was happening in the world around him. That so many of the episodes, the reasons why they were there was because this is currently happening. It wasn't just him going through and thinking about all of the things from his childhood and, all the topics that could possibly be covered, which I'm sure there was some of that in there. But when something happened in the world, it was like, okay, now let's talk through it and work through it and figure out how to present this to kids in a way that they can understand because they're hearing and seeing what's happening in the world. And I want them to be able to process it well.
Even the thing about what happened on 9/11,
Hmm.
he kind of came out of retirement, so to speak, to really have a little small chat, and
Hmm.
he really wanted it weighed on him to say the right thing, and he just did, as only he can. And to me, I think that he was not only speaking to the kids, but he was speaking to adults that maybe had grown up with him and needed to see his face to know that there was some good in the world and somebody could speak. That's what I carried with that is you know
I thought it's also interesting too how each of the puppets kind of represents a different aspect or personality of, even himself and the different ways that you can react to something. Each puppet kind of embodies a different way and a different approach, and all of us kind of have elements of all of those things, all of those ways. It's like, Daniel Tiger is this very sensitive feeling part. And
that's the one he started out with. That's
yeah,
like his core. I think that he's the core that everything kind of
but
rotates
each
around.
one, you've got a logic, you have an anger, with the king,
He's more like
right?
order, and things have to be in order, and I want uh
Right.
he wanted how when things get crazy and he's like, no, this needs to happen
But does it almost remind you a little bit of, what's the kids movie that has all the different emotions?
inside out,
Yeah,
right?
does it remind you a little bit of Inside Out, how
A
you're
little
kind of,
bit.
like, designating each character as an emotion?
I did
I
notice
feel like it
his
almost it's not as cut and dried as that, but it
but
feels like that.
the wife of King Friday is named after, she's Queen Sarah, and his
Mhm,
wife's name is Sarah. His wife, Fred Rogers' wife's name is uh, Sarah Joanne,
mhm.
and she said she quit going by Sarah because it sounded too stuffy. Because she comes from a very very Puritan, almost very very straight laced, interestingly enough, denomination. And so
Mhm,
Sarah is a very Puritan, old style name. So she just says she goes with Joanne, but you notice she's Queen Sarah. And
mhm.
they even said Fred Rogers' sister is named Elaine, and Lady Elaine is the one
Ooh.
who's like simmering, timmering, and she's always doing witchcraft or sorcery magic stuff. And they said the sister said, oh, they would have made me a witch, didn't they? And so it was kind of funny. But some of those are from his life, but some of them
Yeah.
are his voice coming through,
Some
like
of
the
them are
owl,
people and some of them are
and yeah,
right.
yeah,
Are the very logical parts. And I mean, yeah, you can't quite box them as
it's
much
not
as
one to
that,
one, but
but I felt like there's a lot of that where it's kind of, different aspects of, when I feel in this way, this is the way that I approach and think through things. When I'm feeling this way, then this is the way that I approach and think through things. So these different parts of,
ways to express yourself.
right. And, a lot of times we have those different parts of ourselves, and I don't know. It sounds a little bit multiple personality, but
Well,
it's just the different aspects of our personalities that we humans do have. We're complex emotional
they're
beings.
not different people. They're just
Right.
different parts of you, but they're all you.
Right. You sounded a little Fred Rogers there.
They're all you. I have to talk slower. But yeah, but like I said before, there's a lot of these clips are online, that you can actually look those up and see some of those old episodes, and there are quite a few episodes that you can find about the different
Do you
things.
know when
Hmm.
I was a kid, my favorite episode was the one about making crayons?
Everybody talks about that one because,
I don't know
yeah,
why that one
I
stuck
remember
so
that one.
much,
Yeah,
but there was
they
just
show the clips a
something
lot.
about that process that
The wax, melting
just,
the wax, and it's all liquidy, and it's going through those little, yeah,
yeah. And I mean, like I said, we didn't have TV for a while, but when we got TV, Mr. Rogers was one of the things that we would watch, especially Saturday mornings, when the kids programming came on.
stay
That
away
was
from the
one
main
that,
channels because there's too much violence and goofy stuff.
yeah, but I loved Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, but that episode, like, I will always remember that one.
There's a little screen behind him, and he would turn, and they'd watch it, watch it on the little screen, and then you put
Mhm,
a videotape in, and then we'd watch something. It would always be like, and little visits to famous people, a famous jazz trumpeter or famous
mhm.
cellist, and he would just really listen to the music and let it. And that was probably kids' first exposure to, some of those kind of types of music or dance or things like that. And before they got little Einsteins, this is probably the first time they probably had seen a cello being played. Who knows what that might have exposed
Mhm.
people to. But those times though, they're precious and special. And I do feel a twinge of sadness that there's not anything like that anymore that I know of. But it's better that it came and was than never was at all to me.
I think that some things just are so special that they can't really be replicated.
Yeah, don't try.
And I mean, there's some good children's programming that is out there, but yeah, I don't know that we'll ever have a Mr. Rogers again. And I don't know.
It
One
would
of the
come off as
things
cringy too.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, we there will be more good. There will be more beautiful that comes up as God puts people into the time and the space that He calls them to. Yeah, I I have faith in that. One of the other things that hit me from watching the documentary, I don't know, we may just need to call this like a reaction to the documentary about Mr. Rogers.
Yeah.
But one of the things that did kind of jump out at me is that they talked about how, or there was kind of a sadness for where the world has gone. And that, they felt like at the end of his life, that the world was just kind of falling apart. And that it almost felt like the people that were talking about him were sad and felt like he would be sad that he hadn't made a lasting impact in the world. That he kind of came and he touched, several generations. And then he left, and, the world is falling apart, and that it's so much worse now. And that, there was this kind of a sense of loss and of devastation with how bad the world is. And I didn't like that.
How so?
Well, what strikes me when I think about this world, I don't want to end my life going, this world is just so awful and I'm sad that at how bad it is. Because as far as I'm concerned, the world has always had evil and bad. There's always been wars. There's always been disasters. There's always been evil politicians and, you know, monarchies taking over and doing horrible things. And there's always been good. And there's always been beauty. And there's always been people creating things and moments of peace among the chaos. And I think that if there's something that Fred Rogers' life showed, and his message, I don't think that he would have ever given up. I think that he would have said, just like, his famous line, when things that are bad happen, look for the heroes,
For the
the
helpers.
helpers. Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry.
Same to him. But
The helpers are the heroes for sure. But I think that when it comes to there are bad things and there's war and there's chaos, you go look to the ones who are creating beauty. Look to the ones who are creating peace, who are showing love, who are spreading love. And that's something that will always exist. This world has not gotten so bad that there's not still places of beauty and of peace, places where love abounds. Look to your own home. Create a space in your home where there's good. Don't raise your children in an atmosphere of stress where they come out like, oh, the poor climate change activist, Greta, where she's just going, this world is so horrible and it's dying, and how dare you? Why not give her a childhood in a sheltered area where it's good and where there's peace and where there's beauty? Why expose your children at such a young age to all of the awful So they come out thinking and living their life in doom and gloom and anxiety. We are called as parents to shelter our children, to give them a beautiful childhood, and that is actually very easy to do.
It's
And
there's we have the internet and we have cable. And if and there are people that actually cannot find peace and happiness where they're at because they're constantly have this stuff coming at them. Even if you don't look at a particular area of the world, oh, there's something bad happening over here. And
but
we
you
live
know
at a
what?
24-hour news cycle. There's
You turn it
constantly bad
off.
stuff. And it's not that we're saying that we don't care about those things. But the thing that you need to do is take care of others that are near you. There's some things you can't do anything about right now, and you're not called to do that. That's not your calling.
But you don't focus on what you can't do, you focus on what you can do.
Yes.
Yeah. And you create a happy space around you. That doesn't mean that you tune out the world and refuse to acknowledge that there is hurt and suffering. But you don't have to carry that all the time. We can't carry that all the time. We aren't created to be able to. We have to have moments of peace and of joy and of love. And we have to intentionally create those. No matter who you are and what time you live in, you can intentionally create those times where it's just calm and just peace and just love and just beauty. You have to have those moments. And I think that Mr. Rogers chose to focus on the most simple message that he could find, which is you are loved, you are enough, you are special, just the way that you are. Yes, you're going to face things that are hard in your life, but you can succeed because you're growing, you're getting stronger, you're capable. That's what he chose to tell children.
And also what
And
it is to be kind,
right.
kind to others.
And I think that, you know, if there was anything that, I wish that the documentary had done differently, it
Hmm.
was, I felt like they ended on sadness.
It's kind of bittersweet.
Yeah. And they did talk about what his messaging was and always had been. But I almost felt like they thought that he was almost a little simple and that, somebody that pure of a soul can't actually exist in the world anymore because the world is so bad. And it was like, we can all choose, if you're living in such a way that you go, I'm no longer feeling happy and loved and like Mr. Rogers would approve of my life, you can choose to change that. You don't have to go, oh, that was childhood and how beautiful that was to be so pure and innocent and sweet and loving. But now I have to live my adult life where things are just bad and ugly. And, I know better than that now. And this is my life now. And
Right.
it's not good, but, it is what it is. No, you can choose to go back to living a life that is simple and beautiful and loving and sweet and pure. You can choose to go back to it. And I think that we all should. We should live lives that are as idyllic as we can make them. And we can choose to, when things that are ugly and hurtful come our way, to react to them with strength and with kindness and with purity. And, you know, you've got to intentionally choose to live your life in a good way. And I wish that the emphasis had been on we can all be like Mr. Rogers. We can choose to have a life that is good and that is pure and that is kind and that impacts people for good.
Mr. Rogers was just emulating Christ. But they
Exactly.
can't come out and say that. They were just saying, Mr. Rogers is just a good guy. Was he unique? Or were there others,
But there's so
that
many
followed
people
after
that live
Christ that
that
had
way.
that self-sacrificial love and kindness, and see another person as made in the image of God? I think that we get a bad rap as believers in Christ, that we hate and disapprove of all these people, when in fact we love the person, and the person's defined by their personhood, and they exist.
But the thing is we love people so much that we don't want to see them hurting in their sin,
Yeah,
because sin hurts us. When we're living our life that is not the best of what we can be,
yeah.
then we're hurt. We're hurting. We're hurting ourselves. We're hurting other people. So, yeah, you're called up higher to a better way of living. And we love people so much that we want to see them flourishing in their lives. We want to see their lives full of joy that comes from living a life of purity. And yeah, it's hard. There's a struggle, you know, but that's like everything. That's what humanity is. When you see somebody that is sick, we want to see them well. When you see somebody that is struggling in any way, you want to see them do better. And it's hard to get to that place of healing. But that's where we're calling people to go.
So don't always ask yourself, what would Mr. Rogers do? But that's not bad. Ask yourself, what would Jesus do? I know it's become so trite, but really,
We just flashed back to our childhood and our teens. That was all the rage.
oh, I don't have my little band, but yeah, we'll put a link to the documentary in the description. Check it out. I'd love to hear anybody's thoughts in the comments if they want to.
Okay.
But think about that feeling, the feeling that we'll be back when the week is new, and we'll have more ideas for you, and she'll have things we want to talk about, and I will too. I've been wanting to do that the entire episode, and I was like, no, it's fine. If you don't want to do it, it's fine. But I want to leave you with one thing here. So many good quotes, but this one's good for the end of our episode today. Often when you think you're at the end of something, you're at the beginning of something else. So if we're at the end of this episode, we're actually at the beginning of the next one. Think about that. I don't know, that doesn't make sense. But
I think that if we apply that correctly, it's much more profound.
if I stroke my beard and think profound thoughts. No, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. And we are going to get in some interesting topics and authors and books in the next coming year. It's 2026, and it's all new. It's seeing the world through fresh eyes. Do that every day.
Well, we're going to call that a wrap. We'll see you guys next time.